and we're all gambling, shooting dice in my friend's basement home of his parents' house. Fight got out of hand and we were fighting over money. It was the silliest thing. I went to prison for $50. It was so stupid. At the time, my buddy with a knife, and it just kind of changed the trajectory of my life.
What if you could learn directly from the people who've already built what you're chasing? Welcome to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled, where founders, creators, and leaders reveal the real strategies behind building brands that last. This is your masterclass in real-world innovation. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
Some entrepreneurs start with investors, connections, or opportunity. Others start with the prison cell. Today's guest proves that your past does not necessarily define your future. After spending time in prison, he made a decision that changed the trajectory of his life. Through discipline, vision, and relentless determination, he rebuilt his life and became the founder and CEO of the skincare brand T363. This conversation isn't just about business. It's about transformation, accountability, and what it really takes to rebuild your life when the odds are stacked against you. If you enjoy conversations about innovation, resilience, and entrepreneurship, follow Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled, available on the Bravehearts TV network, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and all major podcast platforms. Today, we're joined by Troy Alexander, CEO of T363. Let's unveil the innovator behind the journey. Troy, welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you very much, good man. Good man. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, your story isn't like most stories that I hear or come across. Actually, it's pretty unique. Everyone's story is unique, of course, but yours is really interesting. But before we get into the story of the company that you formed, I want to get a little bit about your origin story, because every entrepreneur has a origin story. So before the company and before the brand, who was Troy Alexander growing up, and what kind of environment shaped you?
I was a lost young man. I was full of ego. I was full of pain. I grew up in a, well-to-do family, but I think, my dad was a big official in government, but he was available, but he wasn't available. And I think it stemmed from my childhood. My mother had me when she was very young, and I didn't really know my sperm donors, I like to call him, no disrespect. She had me at a young age, and, she was very fortunate to marry another gentleman, and he became my father. And I think that trauma of that environment back then when I was a young kid, that really kind of altered the course of my life, even though I was placed in a great environment, with a wonderful stepfather who became my father. And, that 0 to 5 counts. And I was born in Beaufort, South Carolina. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a very rural place. I mean, now it's kind of, built up a little bit, but I go with a dirt road in a trailer.
Okay. Now, when you look back at your younger self, were there any early signs that you might one day become an entrepreneur?
I think I always wanted to build and create something. I never really had this desire to work for anyone. I was very entrepreneurial and I was very inquisitive and was reading and studying and always questioned how things were built and why did this person build this and why did this person build this and why did this person work for someone. So I was always entrepreneurial in that sense, but I didn't really understand it.
Okay. So at what point did life begin to move in a different direction that you didn't expect?
I think when I got into my situation and then I went to prison for 2 years, and that was a massive turning point in my life, and it changed the trajectory of my life. But I like to tell people it was truly the greatest thing that happened to me. It was my Harvard, it was my Yale, it was my Princeton. because I really got a true opportunity to study men for 2 years, but also I got a real good opportunity to understand myself. And it was the greatest blessing. I mean, it was truly the greatest blessing. I know a lot of people may not understand that or make any sense of it, but it catapulted me in ways that I can only imagine. And I'm so happy that that experience happened because here I am today, standing strong.
Excellent. I can understand exactly what you mean. I've growth comes through adversity. So, if you have a flower, you have to have dirt and manure to make it grow, man. So I understand exactly what you mean. Now, you talk about your prison time publicly, about spending time in prison. Can you take us back to the chapter in your life and what that chapter in your life and what led you to prison?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. I was a friends of mine at the time. We were, young teenagers, and we are all gambling, shooting dice in my friend's basement home of his parents' house. And, the fight got out of hand and we were fighting over money. It was the silliest thing. I went to prison for $50. It was so stupid, and, I cut at the time, my buddy with a knife, and it just kind of changed the trajectory of my life. Right. And I remember my mother came around the corner because we all lived in the same neighborhood. Again, we were well-to-do upper middle class children. So we weren't in no impoverished neighborhood. Not to say that you have to be in an impoverished neighborhood to go to prison, but the likelihood of us going, it should never happened.
Yeah, it was very reduced.
Exactly. And I remember my mother looking at me and just seeing the pain in her eyes and just realizing that, you know, this was meant to happen. I think, as I said, going back to Beaufort, South Carolina and that trajectory and, that environment, and but also being taken out of that environment, it was still in my DNA. The anger, the rage, the ego, all of that was still in my DNA. And, when I got arrested and went to the county jail, that was like, oh shit. But I also realized that through that process, there were so many angels, and I mean angels in prison who guided me. I remember the first day, a correctional officer, she said to me, she said, you don't belong here. And I was like, in my head, like, what the hell you mean I don't belong here? But she said, God has a plan for you and you don't belong here. And so just those moments of life just
Mm-hmm.
changed me.
Take us back to what was going through your mind the first night that you realized you weren't going home.
Oh, that's a great question. I've never had that question asked. I think the first night what made me realize that, oh, wow, I'm not going home, when you hear those bars close and you see the concrete and you hear the screams and the moans and the yelling of other men in there. And I was like, oh shit, like, wow, this is, this is real. And you hear sounds of fresh meat, like all of those things are really real. But through prayer, through growth, and just being around the right men in there who guided me, and realized that I- being tough guy is not in my DNA. And you realize that there's some real tough guys in there, and they just kind of guided me. And just it was, we had hours and hours to talk about. I could share more. It was just the most powerful, impactful thing that led me to be on this journey today.
So that's interesting because the same people that impacted or influenced you, there were other people that was available to be impacted and influenced as well. So my question is, for many people in prison, it becomes like the lowest part of their life. But at some point, there was a moment during your incarceration when something shifted mentally for you. What was that moment?
I remember there was an orderly that used to come visit me because at the time, I was in a cell by myself at the time, and I had surgery on my hand, and there was an orderly that used to come visit me, and he would just bring me Bible scriptures and talk to me and just share and just pour into me. I mean, literally pour into me, like you're going to get through this. You're going to get out of here. He was such a remarkable man. And again, I told you the correctional officer, right? It was just so many people that came into my life. And I mean, again, to most people, you can't fathom that, but it was just like God just put these people in my life and just guided me through that process and any kind of hiccups. And I began to realize, like, okay, people actually do care about me, and I'm no tough guy. Put away the ego. I started reading, I started studying, I started just praying and just journaling saved me. I journaled everything. Even to this day, I still journal. I journal every single day, like my ideas, my thoughts. And I started writing what I wanted to accomplish on paper, and here we are today.
Yet writing and journaling is very therapeutic. When you think about prison, prison can either break or transform a person. So during this time when you were taking advantage of the things that were at your disposal, what did you learn about yourself while you were in prison during that time?
I learned that, again, I'm no tough guy. I'm no killer. I'm no murderer. I'm none of that. I also learned that I am a human being, and I learned that men struggle. I learned that I must learn to start loving myself, start appreciating myself, start respecting myself. Um, and also realize that I learned that I should start caring for people and being more open-minded and putting myself in other people's shoes. And I learned all those lessons. Um, I learned, most importantly, respect. I think the world has gotten away from respect. People don't respect anyone. I mean, when you're in prison, it's real serious about respect. There's codes. And I learned that your word is your bond. What you say you're going to do, you're going to do. And I mean, those are intangibles that I think the world has gotten away from. And so those are the most important things that I learned. And that, another thing, let me just jump right in again, that you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, excellent. When you walked out of prison, what's the first promise that you made yourself?
That I remember my cellmate put something on my bed before I left, and they called me young blood when I was in there, because again, I was 19, 20. And he said, young blood, always remember this. He said, if you study the men in here, meaning prison, there is same men out there just dressed up. And so you had 2 years to study these men. You can be able to navigate any man you encounter, rich or poor, because you've had time to study. And he said, if you go out there and do something, the world will listen to you.
Wow. So now you're re-entering society after prison. Sometimes it can be, most of the times actually, it can be incredibly difficult. What were the biggest challenges you faced starting over with your life?
Well, one of the biggest challenges at the time, I had indefinite probation, because I had, I cut someone really bad. And so I had indefinite probation. And so.
How does that work? First of all, Troy, how does it, is no end to it? Is that, or is that a term that's you, is that literal?
Yeah, that's literal.
Wow.
There's some people that have that, right? And so, because I had a violent crime, with a knife, I had indefinite probation. And so I had to basically be at my probation officer like every single second of the day, basically. And I had to prove to her that I was worthy to go out into this world and do something, right? And so, I got a job, right? It was, again, it was angels and blessings, like my first job when I got out. And again, let me just rewind really quickly. I was very blessed. I got out of prison and I went home to a 2-parent household. My dad was a big official in the government. My mom was a dietitian. So I didn't come out and go to a halfway house. So I didn't come out and do what a lot of other people. So I had a base.
Okay.
And so that base led me to understand that, okay, you have another chance to really do something. Again, it goes back to what my cellmate said, go out there and do something, the world will listen to you. And so I had a base. And then I remember one day I ran into a buddy of mine. He came to visit me when I got out, and he said, we sat on my mom's porch, and he said, if you want to fly with the eagles, you got to go where they soar. So I always wanted to go where they soar. And so the soaring was New York. That's one of the steps I was going to go to. And I got out, got a job, and at the time on the application, they said, "Have you ever been convicted of a felon?" And at the time, this particular application, when I filled it out, did not have that. So I got a job, and my first job was picking up trash at an apartment complex. And so I picked up trash, and I had to walk to work because I didn't have a license. And so I was really more of a great steward. So I did everything that I was told to do, did everything I could do. And I slowly started to get released on probation. I could leave the state. I could do this. I could do that. And so over time, I accomplished it, right? And my parents, again, had the means, so they sent me to a therapist. So I had a therapist that I talked to and then kind of worked with me because, getting out of prison and coming back into civilization, things have changed. The people that you knew, they're still in the same track and you're different. And so it was a very interesting journey to be here today through that process.
Mhm. What was the first opportunity that made you believe you could actually rebuild your life?
What my cellmate said, if you young bloods, you have a chance to, if you do something, the world will listen to you. So he poured into me before I left.
So before you left, you was already had that mental
Yeah.
mind's set. Okay.
I had 2 years. I trained my mind. Like right now, my mind is so sharp that nothing can penetrate it, nothing can affect it. And so, I had 2 years to sit with myself, to study, to read, and just believe that I can do anything I want to do, no matter how long it takes.
So when you look back, if you look back now, what habits would you say that or disciplines that you cultivated that helped you rebuild the momentum that was very useful when you first left incarceration?
I still wake up every morning at 5 a.m. I still sit
Mhm.
at 5 a.m. from 5 to 5:30. I sit with myself and just think. And then from 5:30 to 6, I journal. I write my ideas, my goals, however big they are, I write them. And I work out. I read my Bible. I pray. I do all the same habits that I do when I was in there, and I still do it every day. It's non-negotiables for me.
When you were sitting in that prison cell, did you ever believe the life you're living today was even possible at that time?
Um, Early on, no, absolutely not. Early on, no, because you hear about the stigmas and the societal norms of what they say happen to men of color when they're incarcerated. So no, I didn't. But again, when you start hearing like a correction officer saying, you don't belong here, the orderly, the angels that were in there pouring life into me,
Mhm.
then I started to believe that this is possible.
So Troy, I think we talked enough about the prisons. And the reason I want to bring that up is because those who watch and listen to this show are inspiring entrepreneurs. And it's important for them to know that people are entrepreneurs from all different types of backgrounds and experiences. But besides that part of your life, what you've built with T363 is amazing. So let's talk about the business now. Let's talk about the business itself. Where did the idea for T363 first come from?
Yeah, so just to give your audience some context, I was a fashion journalist. I wrote for Forbes, New York Times, Detailed, now Defunct, and I had the opportunity to travel the world. And I did some consulting. I worked with Simrise. Simrise is the second largest flavors and fragrance house in the world. I work with Bentley, Range Rover, all of that kind of stuff from a multicultural angle. And when I was a journalist, I realized that no one was speaking to straight men about how to dress. And then when I started consulting in the beauty world, I saw the same correlation that no one was speaking to straight men about taking care of their skin. And we're not talking about just black men, we're talking about straight men in general, men of all skin tones. And so I went on this quest and this journey to build something, spent time in Seoul, Korea, because, for anyone to understand, Seoul is the mecca of beauty. They're like 5 to 8 years ahead of the Western culture in beauty and grooming for men and women. And so spent time there, purchased every product I could, studied and researched. Again, being a journalist, I tapped into my network and tapped into my relationships and started asking dermatologists and CEOs and beauty companies and all of that stuff. Does this make sense? What do you think about this? And again, they poured into me and said, yes, this makes sense. Yes, you could do this, but it will take time. because trying to get men to take care of themselves is a needle in a haystack. And so initially the brand was called Troy Skincare. But I had my former co-founder and we had a falling out, so I had to buy her out. And then we had a trademark issue. And so I had to change the name. And so one day I was in the shower and I was sitting with myself, and God told me, use your prison number. I was at the time, I was at my friend's house and we were looking through her coffee table books and numbers showed up. And so we sat together and I was like, I'm gonna use the last three of my prison number. And she said, let's put T in the first initial of it, and let's come together with that. And so the name originated just like that. Shower, God talking to me and looking at coffee table books, and the name came that way.
Now, Troy, you have to admit that the skincare industry is extremely competitive. So what I know you said the problem was that straight men weren't being addressed when it came to skincare. But what made you believe that there'll be room for your brand?
Well,
This is let me preface that, because some people may say the reason they're not addressing straight men because straight men aren't interested. So again, it's competitive. What make you think that there was room for your brand to be in this industry?
There's 8.3 billion people in the world. If we really think about life, there's enough for all of us. We have started to believe that there is not enough for all of us. And so there's enough again for everyone, and there's no real competition. Everyone speaks on competition, but there is no real competition. And when you look at the category of men's grooming is wide open, right? Because what they've done is they've sold women hope. They continue to sell women hope, right? So when we talk about that category, that's fragmented. That's saturated, because every other day you're hearing about a woman's line, right? But you rarely hear about a men's line, right? So I can ask you, what are you using to take care of your skin? I think what happens with a lot of men, they go off genetics. They go off with the reason they don't want to take care of themselves is because it's effeminate, right? And so all those things are doing a disservice to us. Men don't really start taking care of themselves until they're taught to, and they're normally taught by a woman in their life. And so truthfully, if it starts, then I'm going to land the plane really quickly, but
No, take your time. I just got a story to back that up. In my case, it's the same thing, but go ahead.
I believe most men don't know how to take care of themselves because they've never been taught how to. And if you look at the climate of the world today, a lot of men today don't know how to tie a tie, don't know how to polish and shine their shoes, barely know how to iron their clothes, right? We're just talking about fundamental things that no one's being taught to do. And then there's a lot of men that don't know how to shave. I mean, just don't know how to shave at all, right? Like, if there's no barbershops, you don't know how to shave, right? So there's fundamental things that no one is teaching men. And what does that all revolve around? Shaving is your face and your skin. And then once you shave, you got to know how to take care of your skin after you shave. And so those fundamentals are being missed in the culture of men today. And so we believe that we can impact that, we can change that, and we can address that. And we're not just a skincare, as we get to talking more, we're building out a whole platform for men.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And the reason I kind of chuckled earlier is because now I use a toner, I use a moisturizer, I use everything. I shave and everything, and I'm pretty much been always like that. However, about a couple of weeks ago, we were in the Bahamas. My wife wanted to go swimming with the pigs, and she's hanging out, and she's like, "Hey, you should use this the skin. What do you call it?
SPF?
Yes, babe, I'm okay. I don't need that." Two days later, man, I'm looking at my bald head, right, and it is just peeling, man. And I should have listened to my wife. She had hers on, she did her thing. But as men, sometimes we kind of we'll be okay. And we do need to, as men, that's the same thing with health wise. That's a whole nother conversation. We need to go to the doctor more. We need to take care of our skin. And so I think there was a place for that, but I just want to know what was going through your mind, because Troy, I guarantee you, and you tell me if I'm wrong, when you had this idea, there were people that were naysayers and said, that's not going to work.
Of course.
Did you have that?
Yes, listen, I still have that. I have that every day. And I think anyone who wants to build or create or do anything will always have naysayers. No one believed that Henry Ford would create the automobile, right? And so I think, I'm one founder who will have naysayers. There's another founder behind me who have a naysayer, and that's just the nature of this life.
Yes.
People won't believe, but one thing I have learned is this, you're when you hear about naysayers, it's mostly people who are close to you, your family or your friends. But an external person, meaning a perfect stranger, again, the angels in my life, they will pour into you. And I think if we start getting people to pour into people and to believe in their ideas and to believe in where they want to go, this world would be a lot different, because I believe fundamentally we're all creators. All of us are creators.
Yes.
We have been told that we can't do certain things, so therefore we don't do certain things.
I agree totally with you. What was the moment when the idea stopped becoming a concept and you realized you had a company that you were actually building? What shift happened? What happened?
I like my trajectory was very different because, again, as I shared with you, I had to buy my co-founder out, COVID, all of those things happened, right? And, I think the idea has always been strong in me, because the one thing that I learned when I was in prison, and I tell people this all the time, if you're in a 6x9 every day and you're looking at concrete, you begin to see through that concrete. And so that gave me the ability to keep seeing forward. And just like when I was in journalism and fashion journalism, they send scouts out around the world to look at what regular people are wearing, and then they go and feed the designer the intel, and the designers create off of what is being shown. And so I'm out in the world every day, and I can see when a man is not taking care of himself. So that also gave me the impetus to keep going. And I think, when I went to the lab, got the first prototype and touched it and felt it, that's when I knew this was real.
Okay. That had to be an awesome feeling too, by the way.
Great feeling. Great feeling. Great feeling.
In the early days, go ahead.
When we get off, I send you some moisturizer. I send you some of our products so you can test and feel.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here with a moisturizer right now. I don't want to show it. I'll show you off when we finish, but I don't want to give anybody any advertising, but yeah, but I use a moisturizer every day. Now, in the early days of the brand, Troy, what was the biggest challenge developing the product, finding capital, or convincing people to believe in the vision? What was those things are common? What was your biggest challenge in the early days?
In the early days, it was really kind of understanding what products should we give people, talking to chemists, talking to dermatologists, right? Having endless conversations, right? Trying to figure out what works for people's skin. So that was the biggest challenge. I think the second biggest challenge for us was we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't come from that industry. We didn't come from that world. It was just an idea. And, like all industries, they're all protected and they all have their, hierarchy and all stuff. And it's just really trying to, navigate that was a challenge as well. And then once you started getting your footing and talking to the right people and having great conversations, you believe that, okay, we can keep going with this. And, building a presentation deck, raising capital, those were all challenges. And, hearing all the naysayers about, funding Black founders and all the things, right? Like it is just, is a lot. But again, I have told investors, if I made it out of prison with murderers, rapers, killers, I could build this.
Yeah. Yeah, that says a lot. Now, we talked about the birth of the business. Let's talk about building the brand for a little bit. Now, trust is everything in skincare. So how did you build credibility with customers who are putting your product on their skin every day for the first time?
Well, I think for us, we just launched just maybe no more than maybe like 4 months ago. And
Okay.
with that launch, we decided just to launch with one product, our moisturizer, because men have heard that word. And I think how we've been able to build trust is through my network. I've been a fashion journalist. I've traveled. Have a really, really good, strong nucleus of people who believe in me, and then they have told their networks about me, and so that's how we built trust. And our product works, it works. And so that's how we kind of slowly did it brick by brick to build trust. This is not a fast run, this is a slow walk, and is a brick by brick movement. And so that's how we've been able to build trust, and it's just been really remarkable.
So let's talk about something that's not remarkable. Let's talk about something that may have cost you, um, but you learned from it. What was the biggest? What was one mistake that you made as an early entrepreneur in this business that became one of the greatest lessons that you learned from?
I may have to share a few things offline. I would do that for you, but so I owe you that when we get offline. Um, but one of the greatest mistakes and lessons that I've learned is to always make sure your paperwork is I's are dotted and T's are crossed. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned. And also know that when you have a great idea, protect that idea and don't share it too much, because there's sharks always lurking.
Yeah, yes, that is definitely true. Now, as the company grew, how did your role evolve as the founder and leader of the company?
I mean, I think it's always ever evolving currently right now. Learning when to pass the buck and let people do what they're great at. I'm bringing on a new COO, and she's out of London, and she took Huda Beauty Global and Fenty Beauty Global. And so she's, going to be the CEO, and she's out of London. And so she's going to be, handling a lot of things. And so I think, just learning how to trust other people in your
Okay.
dream, in your goals, to help you get to where you got to get to.
Fenty, that's the Rihanna's company, right?
Correct. She took it global.
Okay. Okay, great, great, great. What has been the most rewarding moment so far building T363 for you?
Just being open and vulnerable about my story, and just allowing my story to impact and inspire people and let them know that, hey, look where I came from, and look what I'm doing now. And, at the end of the day, I am a convicted felon, but I am moving forward and, showing the world that it's all possible if you believe in yourself.
Yeah. I was watching a podcast, three guys, they have a podcast is about sports. And one of the hosts said they went to a memorial service for a friend that died from his childhood. He's been known for years. And he said he was really moved about what was spoken of this young man, because they had been removed from high school for 20 years, but most of the memorial service was about his high school athletic accomplishments. And he says, I'm not going to belittle those accomplishments, but we have done so much more in the last 20, 30 years that shouldn't be who define us, something that happened so long ago. And so when someone goes through life like you have and you accomplish other things, that becomes what you're known for, not necessarily what has happened to you 20 years ago. And that's the beautiful thing about your story that I love so much, because you're redefining who you are but you're also doing something for others. And that's what makes it so special. I just love your story.
Thank
I
you.
couldn't wait to get you on the show. But let's talk a little bit about innovation and leadership, because we talked about your background. We talked about getting the brand, the company started. When it comes to innovation, when you have a product, now I've interviewed several people now. This is our second season, and I've noticed something, that you're either going to have a product or you're going to have a service. And if you have a service, sometimes you have to give your service away for free. And if you have a product, sometimes you have to give away samples. But your sample has to be different sometimes from others. So when it comes to innovation, and it's the heart of the show, what does innovation mean to you personally when you talk about your skincare line?
That's a great question. I think for us, innovation means that we're constantly studying our customers. We're constantly, scouting, looking to see what's going on, right? I think, in real life is true innovation, right? Because at the end of the day, skincare is skincare, right? You can have some clinically tested things, you can do that, but at the end of the day, at the base of it is skincare, right? But it's like, who knows their customer base the best? That's innovation to me, right? Who is using AI to automate certain things? That's innovation today, right? And who is again talking to their customers. So what we also do is in New York, and we're going to take this across the country over the summer. So we have T363 Voices, where we go around various cities. We will be starting going around various cities, but we have benchmark has started in New York, that we interview men and women about skincare, and we're getting real data in real time. And that's innovation where a lot of people aren't doing. A lot of founders who have beauty companies aren't doing that. They're not actually talking to their customers that way. They're talking to their customers through the device. And so we are using my journalistic skills to go back on the streets and talk to the consumer and the customer about what they need and what they want. And that's what
So
we're looking at as innovation. Innovation to us right now is in real life.
that was my next question. My next question was, how do you balance science, formulation, and customer experience? But you just answered that. You're actually talking to people. You're asking them their opinions about what's important. Now, the beauty industry is full of trends. How do you determine what's real innovation versus what's marketing hype?
Listen, the beauty industry is a great industry, but I think there's a lot of hype. I think there's a lot of hype and not a lot of substance in so many ways. And I think, the consumer is fooled in so many ways, but I think it really stems from education, talking to your consumer, talking to your people and letting them know what you're building, what you're doing. And I think that's where we're going to win.
So I did some research. I tried to find as many interviews I could about you and your company. One of the interviews, you mentioned the possibility of writing a book about your journey.
Correct.
How is that coming along, and what story would you want that book to tell?
Well, I already have a title already. So that's great. And I've been writing it since I walked out of those doors because I've been journaling. So it's actually my journals. It's the stories of my journals. It's the story of real life, the stories of things that my eyes saw. Like I have one chapter called, What My Eyes See. I see razor sharp wires, barbed wires, high powered assault weapons, right? Like I see that, right? And so that's just like a segue. But yeah, I think, more people need to understand that you don't have to be some athlete to be successful. You can build a real business that takes care of your family and changes the trajectory of your life and also changes the trajectory of your family's life.
So where do you see T363 in 10 years from now, everything unfolding the way you envision?
Well, we will have exited by then for a large amount of money, and I will give it all away before I die, helping people.
Interesting.
That's why I see T363. I will give it
Okay.
up away before I will give it all away before I die, helping people and inspiring people and helping people achieve their dreams and goals. And that's what I believe. I think we're all in this life. I think we're all in this earth to make the next person better. And that's my form of helping people be better.
I've adopted a motto. My wife and my friends hear it all the time. I think that our two objectives in life is to please God and serve people. And so what you just described is basically that. And I love that. Now, if someone watching or listening to this interview feels like their past disqualifies them from success, what would you want them to understand about the power of reinvention?
Wow, that's a great question. Surround yourself with the right people. I think a lot of people today, the reason why they doubt themselves of their past failures is because they're around people who don't uplift them and inspire them to be better and do better. And I think that's the number one reason why they're where they are, meaning mentally. And, again, I had 2 years to sit with myself to train my mind. But if you don't have that, start reading the right books, start talking to interesting people, go to a nice restaurant. You never know who you may sit next to that could change your life. Start getting out of your comfort zone and start, being around certain people that you never know could be angels in your life to help you.
Yes, I agree totally. Troy, your story is a powerful reminder that our past does not have to determine our future. What matters most is the decision to change direction, take responsibility, and build something meaningful from the lesson that life gives us. Your journey from one of the lowest moments a person can face to becoming the CEO of a growing skincare brand shows that transformation is possible when discipline, vision, and persistence all come together. Thank you for sharing your story, your insights, and the lessons you've learned along the way. I know that our audience will walk away from this conversation with a new perspective on resilience, reinvention, and what truly means it takes to build something. And to everyone watching or listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled, which is available on Bravehearts TV, via Roku and Amazon Fire TV. It's available on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling the innovator in you. I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing off.
This has been Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled, hosted by A.D. Edwards. For more conversations with innovators and business professionals, follow the show on your favorite podcast app, subscribe on YouTube, watch on the Bravehearts TV network, and visit innovatorsunveiled.com to learn more about the show and upcoming guests.